I had to hit rock bottom and look at myself in the mirror and say, Jim, this is ridiculous. You've got to pick yourself up. Like, your life is not over. Listen, I worked at Disney and DreamWorks and Fox, but I was under stress because in my case, my authenticity was I was a gay man living in a relationship that I was hiding from work. I was completely living the double life. I'm such a firm believer in fate that everything happens for a reason. I had to go through that. I would look at myself in the mirror in the morning and be like, today is going to be a better day than yesterday because we learned. And even when I made mistakes, and I made so many mistakes in my career, and I would always say, we're going to fail forward. We're going to be better today. we're going to be better today than we were yesterday. Because you know what? We're one day wiser. We're one day older.
What would you recommend for those thinking, you know what? Yeah, I do want to maybe create a bit more space in my life. How would you go about doing that?
The easiest thing I can say to your viewers and listeners is...
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. Hiding who we really are, whether it's our boldest ideas, our identity, or our true passions, acts as a massive drain on our daily energy, and it's a recipe for burnout. It's exactly why I sat down with today's guest, Jim Fielding. Jim has spent more than 30 years leading global brands from Disney to The Gap to DreamWorks and 20th Century Fox. He is an executive advisor, best-selling author, and the former president of Disney Stores Worldwide. But his most profound career transformation wasn't just climbing the corporate ladder. It was navigating the physical and mental stress of living a double life early in his career. In this episode, we dive deep into the real cost of inauthenticity and the incredible innovation and performance that unlocks when you live a life that is aligned to who you really are. Jim shares a brilliant framework for managing your own personal energy to ensure sustainable performance in a world full of distractions. And we explore how the best leaders shift from having all the answers to asking curious, open-ended questions that create environments where other people can truly thrive. If you're ready to reclaim your energy and step into your true narrative, this one is for you. It's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Jim, you have spent more than 30 years leading global brands from Disney to The Gap to DreamWorks, 20th Century Fox. What would you say is the biggest mistake you see people make when it comes to living and leading authentically?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting out with a bang there, Cameron. But I think if I can share any pearls of wisdom for myself is I think there's too many people that are afraid, especially in big corporations, to share their authenticity because they think that somehow there is a set of corporate rules or corporate culture or corporate guidelines that they need to follow. And so I think probably the biggest mistake I see people make is not embracing their narrative, their authenticity, their truth earlier, and dealing with that, whatever the ramifications are of that. I personally think the ramifications are positive because for me, not having to edit myself and not having to kind of make up a story or live a story that I thought they wanted to have, if I just truly shared the best parts of Jim, I actually think I performed better because I relaxed and I was more natural and I was more, I feel like more productive and more innovative and frankly, just a nicer person, Cameron, because I think I was more anxious earlier in my career when I was not embracing my authenticity because there's this fear of being found out. And it's not imposter syndrome. I don't want to belittle that and call it imposter syndrome, but there's just this fear of someone finding out your truth, whatever your truth is, and kind of blowing it for you. And so I think the mistake people make, long answer to your question, is having the confidence to do it earlier in their career. And frankly, if it does, and I'm not being cavalier because people need jobs and people need shelter and money and food and everything else. If your company does start not embracing you because of your authenticity, then it's probably not the right place for you to be. And I talk a lot about that with people as well, is maybe it's time to look for something else.
How often do you find it is the not embracing from a company level versus the assumption that I can't be myself because they're not going to like it, or something else there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like it varies honestly by geography, by country,
Mm.
by even region within the United States. And I also think it varies a little bit by industry. I think there's some industries that are very, set in their ways and have very ingrained cultures and very kind of set ways of doing things. And I think where I spend a lot of my time, which are quote more the creative industries like media and entertainment and retail, I think the companies and the corporations are more open than people realize. But I think it does. Listen, I haven't worked in investment banking and I haven't worked in financial planning or insurance or things like that. I know from some clients I've had, it does vary by industry for sure.
I think it's changing as time goes on as well,
Hmm.
where the embracing of that person's authentic self is, if we know that it's going to bring out the best in somebody, then that brings out their best in their performance, in their productivity, their ability to get things done, which helps the organization as well. You mentioned
Yes.
that you were anxious earlier on in your career. So when did this ability to be able to live and lead authentically, was something that happened that led you to be able to really step into
Yeah,
this?
I mean, I started to have physical and mental ailments that I shouldn't have been having at the age I was having. So like I started to have some, stomach issues and some blood pressure issues. And I would go to the doctor like everybody else in America and I kind of just wanted a pill, right? Like the doctor would ask you all kinds of questions and, take your blood pressure and the blood work and all that. And they'd always end up talking to you about, where are you under a lot of stress? And I would always answer no. Like I wasn't even honest with the doctor, but I was under stress because in my case, my authenticity was I was a gay man living in a relationship that I was hiding from work completely. I was completely living the double life and changing pronouns and not involving my partner in anything at work. And even, we had one car at one point in our relationship, and he would pick me up like 5 blocks away from work because I was so afraid to get discovered. And so I was basically lying to the doctor, but I got to the point where I was having enough of these ailments and at a rather young age, I was still in like my mid 20s. And I just realized, and I'm an example of what I just talked about earlier, like the company I was with, it wasn't going to happen for me there. And that I needed to look for something else. And dating myself, this is the late 80s. And so it was a very different time in the world. The height of the AIDS crisis, LGBTQ rights were not being discussed. I mean, it was just a very, very different time. But I made the decision that I was going to make a move to a company where I could be myself. And so I consciously did some research, and it was the old fashioned kind of research, Cameron. I went to a library and I looked at
Took out some
periodicals.
books,
Yes,
some
I looked
articles.
at I used the microfiche machine, and I literally was researching, not necessarily like quote LGBTQ friendly companies, but companies that were known for tolerance. And this was way before any of the rankings or anything like that. And I talk about this in the book. I interviewed as an out gay man. And just to be clear to your listeners and viewers, it did not mean I showed up singing YMCA like in a rainbow sweater, right? But if the interviewer asked me a question about what did I do on the weekend, or, asked me a question about my friends or my family or whatever, just the most innocent questions, I consciously answered it using the correct pronouns. If I went to a gay bowling tournament on the weekend and they asked me what I did on the weekend, I would say I went to a gay bowling tournament. And it was almost like a litmus test for me because I was watching the interviewer to see if they flinched, right? To see if there was like an involuntary response. And I had 6 interviews for that job. It's with the Gap. All of them were non-LGBTQ, but they all turned out to be incredible allies, and nobody flinched. And so I was offered the job. I accepted the job truly for the first time as full authentic Jim, and went to orientation and my first day of work. And, from the day I entered Gap Inc., I was the full and authentic Jim. And I like to say that Gap got the best of me because I relaxed into it. And I had an incredible run there. And then, I started working for them in the Midwest, in Detroit and in Chicago. But I was doing so well, I got promoted to corporate headquarters in San Francisco. And for any of your American listeners, especially any of your queer American listeners, I mean, a little gay boy from Ohio getting a job in San Francisco is like when the Wizard of Oz goes color, right? Like landing in the 90s in San Francisco as a gay man, even though we were still dealing with the AIDS crisis and a lot of issues, I literally felt like my life was in color for the first time. And I truly understood the word community, and I understood taking care of each other. And I'm so grateful to the Gap for that. The Gap taught me a lot. The Gap taught me a lot personally. It also taught me a lot professionally. And I was at the Gap for 9 years, and I used those 9 years still today. It was an incredible time to be there. And it was the perfect time for me personally, too.
Personally, then, how did that impact your own self? How did it impact your relationship? How did it impact those individual pieces?
It helped my partner. It helped my relationship a lot because he was fully involved in my life. And like if there was a work Christmas party or a summer picnic, he actually got to go, right? Like he wasn't in the closet with me. The interesting thing about my story is I came out at work before I came out to my family. Like I did it backwards. And all of a sudden I woke up and was like, I've got to talk to my mom and dad. Like my sister knew and was keeping my secret for me. But I was like, wait a minute, I literally came out professionally and I'm still not fully out personally. And so I had to kind of backpedal and go through that with my mom and dad, which is not normal. I mean, most people come out to their families or their friends first and then deal with the work thing. I kind of did it backwards. But
what were some of those big lessons that you learned at the Gap then? You mentioned there was a pretty transformative time by the sounds of it. And what were some of those things early on that you learned?
I mean, when I was at the Gap in the late 80s and almost all of the 90s, which was like the first heyday of the Gap. And I tell people it was like getting a master's degree in specialty retailing. I mean, working for Mickey Drexler, who is a legend in the retail industry. And I was traveling around the world. Like when I first started out running stores, I was a district manager. So I had 8, 10, 12 stores I was in charge of. And then I got moved into product development and I started traveling around the world. I was on the road probably 60, 70% of the time, and literally all over the Far East, the Middle East, Israel, Africa, anywhere where product was made, Latin America, South America, Central America. And I learned how to make product. I learned how to partner with factories. I learned how to inspect factories for compliance. I learned about the power of classic specialty store merchandising. I mean, those were the days of everybody wearing khakis and everybody wearing white shirts and denim jeans. And we were just selling tremendous amounts of units every week. And we had to make sure that that product was the right quality standard and fit correctly and lasted and didn't fade and all of those kind of things. And I learned all of that at the Gap, and I learned it on the job. I mean, it was literally on the job training. It was like being thrown into the frying pan. Like, there was no go to this classroom and learn theory. It was literally roll up your sleeves, learn it on the job. Jim, you're going to Madagascar. Jim, you're going to Mauritius. Like, I was like, to be honest, I had to look up where Madagascar was. I didn't know where Madagascar, I'm like, I'm going to Madagascar. Okay. But it was unbelievable. I learned how to make jeans. I learned how to make sweaters. I learned how to make polo shirts. I learned how to make fleece.
Do you thrive in those uncertain environments?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a planner. You know me pretty well, Cameron. I am a planner. I like structure, but I'm interesting because I also am a lifelong learner and I'm constantly curious. And so when I feel stretched, that's a good thing for me.
Yeah.
And Gap was the kind of place, and I've told this story. I've loved every company I've worked for, but Gap and Disney, what they have in common was I'd never worked with so many smart people around me, right? Where you're just surrounded by really smart people to the point of you would take work home at night to study because you knew you had a meeting the next day and you were like, I don't want to look stupid in front of my peers. I don't want to look ill prepared. And I loved that. It was a very collaborative environment. I'm not saying it was competitive, but there was a standard that was set that I wanted to be better. I personally wanted to be better at my job, not necessarily to get promoted or make more money or get promoted before someone else. I just wanted to be better at my job. And I thrived in those environments. And it was the same way in college and in high school. I was always great when I was in a group of driven, ambitious, smart people because it made me raise my game. And I think that's been a hallmark of my entire life is this lifelong learner and just staying curious. I'm just constantly curious. And that's what Gap did for me. Disney did it for me too. It was a different time in my life. I mean, I was at a different point in my career, but Gap really kind of took this lump of clay, Jim, and molded him into a specialty store executive through experience, through travel and special projects and collaborative workforce teams and things like that. It was, I mean, the people I was working with, I worked with a team that was based in Hong Kong that I'm still in touch with. I mean, 30 years later, really, really formative time in my life.
No, having people around you that are smarter than you, better than you in certain areas, you're going to be better in certain areas and they're going to be better in other areas. And there is something great about that continued inspiration. And it's, like you mentioned, it's not necessarily, if you can get around an environment, around people, whether it's at work or in your own personal lives, where there are people that are challenging you to step into a greater version of yourself without being an ass about it. That there is a, like you said, there's standards that are being there, and raising your standards is just an incredible way to continue stepping into a greater version of yourself. You shared about the stress from when you weren't living authentically. Then each of these examples that you gave so far, and we've only just scratched the surface on the career of the 30 plus year career in this space.
Yeah.
There's also stress there.
Oh yeah.
And so let's talk about
different
stress.
Kinds of stress.
Exactly. Let's talk about stress and the different kinds of stress and what you found and how you were able to make sure that you're dealing with the right kinds of stress for continued growth and evolution.
No, I think it's a really good line of discussion, Cameron, because there's different kinds of stress. I mean, working for some of the world's leading companies, working for some of the world's leading brands, it is a 24/7 endeavor. But I knew how to manage that stress. It was a different kind of stress. It was that was learning about how to manage stress and how to be productive in the productive hours and then how to rest when it was the rest time and not let stress debilitate you, right? The stress of inauthenticity and living a double life is a different kind of stress because I literally felt like I was lying to people, right? And that was something that was very anti the way I was brought up. I mean, you're not supposed to lie. And I was lying because I wasn't telling the whole truth. And it wasn't even saying, oh, I'm doing white lies or certain color lie. I was just outright lying. I was not sharing my truth. The stress of being in a competitive workplace and wanting to be better every day, that growth mindset that you're talking about, that's a different kind of stress. And then what you need to learn with that kind of stress is that balance of when to turn it off, when to relax. I had an incredible boss at Disney named Danny Mooney who talked about blazing and grazing. And he was a great role model for that of when you're at work and you're in that mode, you blaze. But then when you get in that car and you drive home, you're in graze mode. Or when you're on vacation, you're in graze mode. And he was a great role model and I think I did this even as a bot. Like if he was on vacation for 2 weeks, he would literally say, I'm not checking email unless this place is on fire or there's some emergency. I do not want to hear from any of you. You are capable executives. You can do your jobs. And that was a really incredible inspiration for the rest of us, so that when I went on vacation, I would say the same thing to my team. I'm not going to check the numbers every day. I'm not going to check my emails. If there's something urgent, call me, but only if it's super urgent and you cannot solve it on yourself, but by yourself. So it's you learn different techniques, and it's a different kind of stress. It's manageable.
Yeah. Go through some of the tactics that you had for that blazing and grazing in a moment. I want to see if there's maybe a connection between the two when it comes to the expenditure of energy. Right, because whenever we are doing things, whenever we're thinking, whenever we're acting, whenever we're doing anything, there is an expenditure of energy that's occurring. And my thinking with what you just shared there would be that the inauthentic self, you're having to constantly blaze because you're having to constantly be on to making sure that everything is right. Everything, this hasn't been said to somebody else, making sure that I don't say something,
Oh my God,
make sure this.
Yeah.
And the constant.
What did I tell her? What did I tell
and
him?
the constant energy expenditure that's going on there would be maybe similar to being in constant blaze mode and never being able to have any time off, which would be a recipe for
burnout.
Recipe for stomach issues, recipe for any of those kinds of things that are naturally going to show up when we're constantly expending energy. Would that be fair?
Very fair. No, very fair. I mean, it's, I mean, I think, well, you understand, Cameron, because you're also a performer. I was basically playing a role when I was living inauthentically. It was like being an actor, right? I was playing the role of what I thought was a retail executive that company wanted, right? I was not showing up as myself. So that was kind of like going on stage every day, right? Like it was basically a performance every day. And it is all about energy management and energy allocation and battery usage and, draining your batteries. And for me, when I drain my batteries, I tend to get physically sick. My body, I'll get a flu or I'll get a stomach ailment. Even now, like if I don't nourish my body and respect my body, it will shut down. It will do something. It will give me a headache, or it will give me a stomach ache or something to say to me, okay, Fielding, take it down a notch. So it is energy management. And I think the more experience I got in the industry, the more comfortable I felt in my role. The longer I was with companies for a long time. I had long tenures at these companies. And so I would learn the culture, and I would learn processes, and I would learn systems, and I'd learn how to make them work for me and how to allocate energy, to your point. So I think the difference was in the inauthenticity of not sharing my story was you did start to think, did I tell that person what I did last weekend? You know what I mean? Like you were like, because you were making up stories as you were going, right? And so that, even with my own family and friends, I mean, I came out to people at different points. It's not like I called every friend I had in one weekend and shared my story. And so then, the circle is getting a little bit wider, and it's and then you're like, oh, wait a minute. What if Linda sees Lisa before I tell Lisa? Like you literally are worrying about that stuff. And it's so unhealthy, and it's such a drain, and it's so distracting, but it's the reality, But yes, I think it's fair to tie it together. It's about energy/resource management and allocation for sure.
And I think on that end of the spectrum, it's that living authentically, whether it's your sexuality or whether it's a dream that you have that you're not chasing. Like there are so many different angles that this can move into, and ensuring that you're continuing to ask yourself, how could I be even more of myself? How could I bring even more of myself to this? And this is where I think, like, we each of us, I see it as an edge, right? Like if you can unlock your edge of, which is your unique values, your unique strengths, your unique self, your unique unique
Yeah, I love that term.
person that you have, and you bring that to a situation. That's an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to become an even greater version of yourself. And so,
Smart.
on the other side of it, the blaze and graze, I really love that. I'm going to use that going forward. Of
Andy
just like
Mooney.
thinking through
God
that.
bless Andy Mooney.
Andy Mooney. Okay. We'll make sure that's in the, Andy Mooney's in the show notes.
He's gotten tons of love for me. And
I love it. I love it. So the blaze and graze, I think about it because this is, you learned that a long time ago, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Today, we have an insane amount more distractions that can potentially bleed into the grazing phase. And our devices are with us most of the time. And I would say this is maybe even more important now, because if we're never off, if we're always expending energy, it's a recipe for burnout. I've learned this the hard way on multiple occasions of feeling burnt out because I go too much, too hard, and I aim to achieve great things, but I'm continuing to learn that for sustainable performance, to be able to truly live in alignment with who I am and who it is that I'm aiming to become, there needs to be an ebb and flow of that. There needs to be an expenditure and a replenishment going on. We're not machines. We need to be able to replenish that. And so the example that you gave of Andy saying, okay, the vacation is going on for a couple of weeks and he's not going to be checking it all is brilliant. What are some of the things that you do now that helps you to graze rather than blaze in those appropriate times?
I mean, some of them, you're going to laugh because it is so much about device management now, right? Yeah. And some of them, like other people have talked about, I remember I learned this from Ariana Huffington. Like, I plug my cell phone in my office, not in my bedroom, right? I don't have my cell phone. I have a separate alarm clock in my bedroom. You know what I mean? I don't use the clock on my phone because that was everybody's excuse, right? Like, that's my alarm clock. That's everything else. And for me, I had a really hard time because the alarm clock would go off and 9 times out of 10, I would roll over and look at my email or look at my text. And then you're instantly in work mode, right? Even if they were great emails or texts, you're in work mode. And by having my device in another room where I physically have to get up and like go to it, it means my morning routine is different. Like, I do other things first, whether it's take the dogs outside or take the dogs for a walk or feed the dogs or make my coffee. Like, there's other things I do before I ever get to the device, because the device and the work world and the real world is going to be there when you get to it. But that was something I had to learn, was to plug my device in somewhere else. I don't carry my phone around with me. Like, I'm not on my phone. Like, I'll put a phone like in a charging station, or again, plug it in another room and just leave it there. And then I'll go read a book, or I'll go to dinner, or I'll go, like, I don't always have my phone with me. Sometimes I have it with me and I have it on silent because in case there's an emergency or something. But I've had to learn and role model for people phone time, because we are attached to it. And it's got our music, it's got our photos, it's got our life now, right? And so anytime somebody says, hey, do you have a photo of your dog? Like, you go to your phone, right? I mean, that's where they are. Or what are you listening to? Show me your playlist, right? It's on your phone, like it's on your device. But the scary thing is right next to the music icon or the podcast icon or the photo icon is text, is email, is phone, right? Voicemail. I think, to your point, I think it's harder now to have the discipline on the blaze and graze than it was when I first learned it in the 2000s. Because when I first learned it, we were on BlackBerries still. It was like it was pre-iPhone. And, I was still traveling with my CD player and, a pack of 24 CDs. I mean, there's so many great things of technology advancing. And there's also things where you do have to learn new skills so that you're not 24/7 connected. I think it's even funny right now with the Olympics. I love the Olympics, and the Olympics are on right now. I know they won't be on when this episode comes out, but because of the time difference, because the Olympics are in Italy, you could know all the results when they happen because of your news app, right? Or your feed. I consciously have not looked because I actually like to watch the show and find out what happens later in the day. But again, that's a discipline I've had to do. I'm like, nope, not going to look, not going to look what happened in the ice skating, not going to look what happened in the skiing. I want to actually watch it on TV. I want to actually watch them.
There's a delayed gratification.
Delayed
with that,
gratification.
you know?
It is.
And
It is. But it's a discipline that comes with it.
It's absolutely a discipline as well. And especially what I like about what you're doing with that is that you're reducing the likelihood that you are going to make a decision that's out of alignment with what it is that you're actually wanting to do. And by having a phone in another room, it reduces the likelihood that you're going to not be disciplined in that moment. And there's a certain amount of decisions that we can make, you know, within a day before we start getting, you know, decision fatigue. Okay. And this is why the studies have shown that later in the day, it's more difficult to be disciplined.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And so,
and the older you get too, I mean, I'm 60 now. I mean,
Right.
there's a limit. Again, I'm a lifelong learner and I hope my gray matter continues to form. But I also think there's a limit where I'm like, my capacity is getting full. Like my hard drive's getting full. And so I want to make sure that I'm using my hard drive, you know, appropriately.
Yeah. There's
I totally agree
intentionality
with
there.
you.
Yeah. Intentionality is there as well. Definitely. I really like that. And I think about it with like, there's a reason why I don't have certain foods in the house.
Yeah.
Because if there's potato chips
You're going to
in
eat
that
them.
cupboard, I give it maybe 2. Like if I'm feeling really strong, 3 days, you know, that's about it. Like it's gonna happen, right?
I get it.
Constantly there's a little voice going, eat me, eat me, eat me, right?
Okay,
And
yours is potato chips. Mine is peanut M&Ms.
There we go.
And I literally will buy a bag of peanut M&Ms and tell myself it's going to last a week. And I pour them out in a bowl because I actually think they look kind of pretty. And I will find excuses to walk past that bowl of M&Ms, right?
Yep.
And just, I'll only take 2 or 3 or I'll only take 2. But to your point, if I don't buy the peanut M&Ms in the first place, if they don't make it into the house, I won't do it. And it's control and I love when you said before, it's intentionality.
Yeah.
And I say all the time, you know, control what you can control, but leave space for the possible. But also we cannot control everything going on in the world, but we can control our access and our reaction to it.
Oh,
right?
that's so good.
Because here's the other thing about the Olympics.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at the news feed for the Olympics, I'm also going to be looking about the news feed about what's going on in the world, in Ukraine or Israel or anywhere, right? Because they're all kind of there next to each other. So that's what I'm doing is I'm controlling, again, my energy because something's going to distract me. If I go to look for the Olympic results, something's going to distract me. A celebrity that passed away. Like it could be the most... you know, normal thing, but it's going to distract me.
That point about access and reaction, because we've all heard, okay, you can't necessarily control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to the situation. And it's such an important piece of that. And you can control in a lot of cases, as you're referring to here, what you access and what you don't have access to. And I think this is where I was having a conversation with someone fairly recently about doing hard things. It might have been on the podcast with another guest of choosing the things that are difficult for you, because I think it's so important for us to continue as things are getting easier with AI to be able to get an answer. It's important to continue developing our ability to find and just develop our thinking around an answer and to seek out the answer versus just getting it to tell us the answer. There's a study out of MIT last year that showed that your ability to be able to remember after utilizing that to write, in this case, it was an essay for college students versus utilizing search engine versus utilizing nothing at all. AI version, like the people that were in that group, was way lower in their ability to be able to remember what they even wrote in the essay. And so our ability to be able to, again, develop the ability in certain things and then other areas, make it easy on yourself. get the stuff out. I thought about this back in 2018. I went through a real process of reducing my body fat and getting in better shape. And it was at the point where I got in the worst shape that I've ever been in. And got to January 1st, 2018. I go, right, this is it. And January 1st, and I still had literally that bag of potato chips was there.
I knew the potato chips were coming.
It's all good. I'll have them there. And then, it ended up being, okay, it wasn't January 1st that I started. It was January 2nd because those potato chips got eaten, right? But I will say, and this is where you can utilize, if you've got the discipline, you can utilize some of these things to your advantage. So what I actually did, because it's not for me, the vice is like anything potato, whether it's like I can make my own fries or something like that in like an air fryer now or in the oven. Oh my gosh, amazing, right? And so I had this potato.
It's
right?
potatoes.
I had a potato, right? And I had that. I was in Mexico City at the time. I lived there for the first few months of 2018. And after this event of January 1st, when I ate the potatoes, I was right, I'm showing who's boss here. I grabbed this potato and in the refrigerator, I put it in like on the shelf, front and center. And I gone, let's see who's boss now. Right. And there was nobody else that I told this to. It was me against the potato. Right. And for 3 months, I've still got my tracking mechanisms that I went through, and I went down like clockwork and kicked absolute butt during this process and reduced my body fat by a huge amount, because it became a fun thing that I was like, anytime I go to the refrigerator, like, yeah, you got nothing on me, man. And because I continue to build that, but it was difficult in the beginning. And again, you've got to choose something, and this is just a fun example. You've got to choose the things that you want to have around you that is going to be difficult for you to make a decision as to whether you do something or not, right? And better to have certain things that are outside of your, like you said, have it out of the bedroom or out of the office or whatever it is. It inspires me to think about, when I'm at the gym, I do find myself, because I have to access with my phone to get into the gym, I'm thinking about how could I reduce the amount of times that I do check my phone in between the sets. And maybe I just switch it off. Maybe I just switch it off immediately as soon as I get in.
Yeah, or like put it on airplane mode, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, right? Like, I mean, it's so funny because I was in the gym, probably 6 or 7 months ago, and there was a person running, and they had like an old version of the iPod, like the old like clip. It looked like the little clip. And they stopped running. They were like getting off the machine. And I said, oh my God, what year is that from? And it was like literally one of the OG iPods. And I said to the guy, why that? And it's literally what you're talking about, Cameron. Yep. He said, because all I wanted was music. I didn't want texts. I didn't want photos. I didn't want messages. When I'm here working out, all I want is my music that I work out to, and it has my workout playlists on it, and that's all I care about. And I kind of looked at him and I thought, brilliant, right? Now, I'm sure he could get no support on that because Apple stopped supporting that probably 10 years ago, and he's probably got like one charger and, everything else. But it's what he was doing is exactly what we're talking about. He was controlling access because he knew himself, okay, if I am listening to my music on my phone, texts are still going to come in or emails are still going to come in unless I shut them off. And it's funny for me, I even find it in like choice of social platforms. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but like the other day I was talking to some of the freelancers that I work with that help me with my social media and stuff. And they said, Jim, you really should be getting on TikTok. And I was like, oh, and it was all about short form video, Cameron, right? And, from my podcast, you could be putting your clips from your podcast on TikTok. And I literally said, no, I'm not doing TikTok. I've already got LinkedIn. I've already got Instagram. I've already got YouTube. No. And they were shocked, right? And they're like, but like they're giving me all these reasons. And I said, you know what, guys? I can't handle another platform. Like I just can't. But that was 60-year-old Jim talking. 40-year-old Jim would have, everything, Snapchat, TikTok, like I'd have whatever that, I'd have everything going. 60-year-old Jim is like, I know what I'm capable of. And because I knew that if I downloaded TikTok and we started doing it, then I would get competitive about TikTok and I'd wanted to get more views. I'd want to get more views on TikTok and everything else. I'm not even close to scratching the surface on the social media platforms I'm on now. Why add another one? I can't.
Yeah. For those listening, I think it would be a really valuable thing. And I think I'm going to do this with Brittany, my wife, as well. And is like doing an access audit on your life. And write down what are the things that you're getting access that's so easy for you to access right now, because you can go through food, you can go through alcohol, you can go through different bad habits, your device, your computer. What are those things that you're finding are maybe a little too easy to access and are resulting in the time being spent in a way that isn't aligned to what you ideally want?
How are you guys about when you go out to dinner? Because this is something we had to work on. Like, I would be miffed because we'd be sitting at dinner, like we go to a nice restaurant and we'd both have our phones out. Like, and it was a two-way street. Like while we were waiting for the food to come or whatever. And like literally we had to put them away. Again, we have them with us because of emergencies. But I was like, put them in the bag that we carried in because we're going to communicate. We're going to sit across this table from each other.
Well, I think that's what's really important, isn't it? Is we were out for dinner with a couple that looked after Indy, our dog, while we were back in Australia, and it was just an amazing, just beautiful conversation, and the phones were not out, and I think one big part is like, get it off the table for one. Do not put it on the table whatsoever. I don't care if it's right way up or upside down, whatever it is. If that's on there, you're sending a signal that there's something else that's more important. And be there with the person. Be there, be present. And so, put it down in your, and if you can, if you're going as a couple, like just take one device. You only need, if you already know how to get there, you already know like, where the place is, like leave them both at home. Again, that access piece is what's really important. And I'd say going onward from like little side note to this, when it comes to the access, because if we're talking from a food standpoint as well, all of a sudden you've got access to all of these different types of food and things. And if you're aiming to be healthier or, whatever your goals are from a health and well-being standpoint, one of the things that I do is I know where I'm going. I check out the menu. I get a good feel for what it is. I'll give an approximate, okay, this is probably about the amount of calories. And I'm going to, usually I'm going to add another 20% on top because of the way that, chefs will cook it. There'll be more oil, there'll be more salt, there'll be more sugar, all those things. And that's as it is. Yeah. And then I kind of work backwards and I'll usually end up fasting for a period of time. I fast anyway, but I might fast for a longer period of time because I get to dinner and I'm like, oh yeah, let me at it, right? And I know that I've got the ability to be able to have that. And I can have that anyway, but if I have specifics that I'm aiming for from a health and well-being standpoint, I know that access. I know, if I'm going to a place and there's a buffet, right? You've got access to all the different types of food, right? If you're going and you're at an event or something like that, and you've got this insane amount of food that's available to you, again, being a little more conscious about how it is that you're going to behave.
You're being planful. Yeah, planful. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so wise because again, you're controlling what you can control, right? I mean, of course, we all love going out to eat. We love adventurous chefs. We love the social parts of going out to eat and stuff, but there is ways to control it, right?
Yeah.
Or make
while still
that
enjoying.
your treat. Yeah, make that your treat of the week. But in order to do that, you don't have lunch that day or you don't have lunch the next day, right? Like, I think that's just wisdom and maturity. And again, as you age, I keep talking about aging, but as your body changes and as you age and your metabolism changes and stuff, you have to learn different ways, right? When you're younger, if I needed to drop 5 pounds in a weekend, I could. That's not happening now, right? So those 5 pounds could be around for a long time if I put 5 pounds on.
It's so much easier to put it on than it is to take it off, right?
It is. So, that extra piece of cheesecake may not be my conscious decision, but again, it's just being planful,
Yeah.
and so much of life. And again, it's not like I'm an anal retentive control freak. I was at one point in my life. I'm not anymore. I'm much more relaxed now, but I'm not a victim of anything. Like I say that all the time. Like I'm not a victim of like, oh, poor me. How did I gain weight? I know exactly how I gained weight. I had too much alcohol or I ate too much sweets or whatever, right? I refuse to play the victim. Like I think, again, as you get more wisdom and experience, there is a cause and effect. And you also realize that life is very cyclical. And even though there's new things coming all the time and new technology and new, everybody, oh, AI. I'm like, okay, AI is new, but it's just a new form of technology, right? And you start to see the cycles. You start to see, and you kind of say, oh, I remember we went through something like this before, and this is how I reacted. Like you fall back on your memories and you fall back on your experience. And I love that. It's one of the things I love about aging is there's very few new things that come your way where you're like, oh, never seen this before. Dumb things like weather or, stock market or things like that. Like you just start to see the cycles. I mean, life is a cycle, and very, very cyclical.
Well, with that, there's a few times you've mentioned so far that, okay, you used to be that, but now it's something different. And so it's almost like there's this wisdom that's been built over time, these things that do tend to go in a cyclical nature. And then there also seems like there's these phases that you've gone through over time. Like
Chapters.
what have been some of those, like, are there certain chapters? Are there a few chapters that define you? And
I'm an Aries. And if you know any Aries in your life, we love our birthdays. Like Aries loves our birthdays. And so my birthday to me is kind of like New Year's Eve to everybody else. I tend to look at my life in my birth year cycles. So I'm April 6th, so April to April. The birthdays that are the most meaningful to me are the ones that end in 5s and 0s. So like 5-year cycles, right? And if I look back at my life now at like decades and then like cutting the decades in half, like I can see those as different phases and different chapters. And a lot of them, of course, are associated with where was I working then and who was I dating or who was I partnered with at that point. There's been lots of constants too. My friends, my sister, they've been around the whole time, right? But I think other people move in and out depending on, what phase or what chapter you're in. And I tend to look at my life in those kind of 5-year cycles. And I don't plan 5 years at a time, but I think about what do I want to accomplish. I almost write like a review of myself around my birthday. Like what went well last year, what didn't go so well next year, what do I want to accomplish this year? Not New Year's resolutions, not, things I write down and then hold myself accountable to, but just more of a conversation with myself. And I think I learned in every one of those chapters. And I also think the world changes and leadership changes. And there was a time in my life, we talked about this, Cameron, where I was rewarded and promoted for having all the answers and for being Johnny on the spot and being fast and I honestly thought my job at one point in my career was to have all the answers and tell my team what to do and then let them execute, right? And I quickly learned, especially kind of in the later phases of my life, that like I was basically becoming a control freak and setting unrealistic standards and creating really like not a healthy work environment because I was hiring all these really, really bright people with all of this experience and surrounding myself with all this talent and then not really creating the conditions for them to thrive. And I think that's really where I changed in probably the last 10 years of my corporate career was I realized that my job was not about my growth or my ideas. It was really about creating the environment for other people to thrive in. And I think because of that, I became a much more pleasant boss. I think I got better performance out of the team. I had people that, my turnover went down. People stayed longer. People gave me more, I think, because I created an environment where they were able to thrive. And I think that was one of the big changes. I'd say early gym leader versus later gym leader. It definitely was I had to have all the answers. I thought I was going to get promoted and recognized and rewarded for being the solution provider. And what I realized was, no, I needed to hire the solution providers and create the right world for them to work in, the right environment for them to work in. I mean, that was a big change for me. And I think, I went from traditional retail into catalog retailing, into e-commerce. Like I moved, even within industries, I moved jobs within industries. I think it's back to my lifelong learning. And I can see those phases too. Like, moving to Disney for me, those 12 years at Disney, they're like multiple chapters. I mean, I got there when I think I just turned 35. Yeah. 35, 36, left there when I was almost 50. I mean, so basically my 40s were spent at Disney, right? Like if you think of that decade, very different. But I also changed as a person. My first niece was born when I was at Disney, so I became an uncle. I watched my sister and brother-in-law become parents. I watched my parents become grandparents. There was things that went on in my personal life and professional life. And so my oldest niece, Katie, I call her my Disney baby. Like that's how I remember how old she is, because she literally was born when I went to Disney. I definitely do look at my life, to your question, in whatever you want to call it, chapters, phases, sections.
Yeah.
It's always gym. There's always gym there. Like there's core gym stuff that's never going to change. And by the way, I don't ever want to stop evolving. That would be very sad. Like I think that would be very boring.
Yeah. You mentioned about the creating an environment for others to thrive. And I think you were specifically talking from a business point of view. And yes, this is what I'm about to ask is massively is within that space. I think this also applies for life as well. Like how do we create an environment for people to thrive? How do we show up in a way that enables people the opportunity to thrive around us?
Yeah.
And you shared about earlier on feeling like you needed to have all the answers, and maybe that's shifted now. How do you see the world now? And how do you see that playing a role in enabling people to thrive?
I think a lot of it came, I went back to school in 2024 to get my coaching credentials. I went back to Emory University here to one of their graduate extension courses for 6 months. And what you learn in coaching is to ask really good questions. Yeah. And I think that helped me in my professional life, my personal life. It helps me even, when I do my own podcast. I'm a really good question asker now. I'm a really good open-ended question asker to not instantly provide the answers. And I literally have to say to myself, because if you ask me, of course, my instinct is going to be like, solve the problem, solve the problem. That's how I was trained, right? If you say, Jim, do you like red or do you like blue? I know this is really simplifying. I'm instantly going to be like blue, 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 right? But now what I've learned is to pause and take that breath and ask other people around me, what do you guys think about red versus blue? Why? Maybe that'll influence me. Maybe I'll say, oh, I like red better in this situation, right? And again, I'm way oversimplifying for your listeners and viewers, but it's that discipline again of not just immediately having the answer and then moving into execution mode. It's staying in that curiosity mode. And it's funny because I'll even say, and you'll probably understand this because I think you're probably like this, Cameron, like in my friend group, I tend to be an organizer, right? And I'm talking about friends I've had for a very long time. And I literally in the last couple of years have said to them, guys, I do not want to be the cruise director anymore. Like I'm done with that role. I want to be the one who's on vacation and just being spontaneous. Like I want someone else to figure out what hotel we're going to stay at and someone else to figure out what dinner we're going to go to. You know what I mean? Like I was always that person. And it was kind of like, well, Jim will do it. right? And in many cases, I never even gave anyone another chance to do it. I just did it and they liked it, right? Like I socialized them that way. And I literally had to raise my hand and say, guys, I'm not doing that anymore. Like that's tiring because I would be the one at the end of a vacation, like a group vacation, Cameron, I'd be tired.
You're
Right.
blazing.
Like, because I was blazing on vacation because I was like, okay, we're going horseback riding at 10 and we're going to, the shaman's coming at 1 and then we're going to go stargazing at night. And I was Marge in charge. And I thought that was my role. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And it doesn't mean, again, I still don't have a goal. I still don't have a plan. I still don't have a calendar. It's just my initial reaction now is pause, take a breath. Sometimes when I first started, Cameron, I'd have to almost count to 7. Like if someone would ask me a question in my mind, I'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4 before I instantly answered. Because old Jim would have just been like instantly answer. And even things like you and I talked about this. If a person from my team came into me and said, Jim, we have a problem. Walmart canceled their order on the Princess dolls, right? Old Jim would have been like, okay, call this person, this person, this person. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And like, boom, the person would walk out, right? New Jim or better Jim would say, well, how do you think we should handle it? That's the ask for an answer, right? That's the discipline to say, okay, that's a problem. Okay, Walmart canceled their order. How do you think we should handle it? Doesn't mean I'm 1000% going to take what the person says, but just to have the conversation and to step back and say, okay, you brought me the problem. Now let's build a solution together, not just let me be the problem solver.
Well, if you end up being the problem solver, then you're the bottleneck as well, right?
100%.
And you're not providing them with the opportunity to grow. Yes.
Yes, they're not growing.
What was really interesting when you were sharing about the red and the blue, giving that simple example, is, and you mentioned the word curiosity a little after that. It was the words along these lines, and I'll paraphrase. What do you think of the red and the blue? And if you notice in your voice and in my voice just now, there is a curious tonality, and the tonality really, really matters because somebody else is going to perceive your question in a certain way. And if you're directing the question for the purpose of proving that you're right about something versus I'm going to ask the question because I'm genuinely curious about how you think or how you feel or what you feel would be best or what your perspective is on this, they're going to get 2 wildly different answers and wildly different responses. And so that curiosity, we have curious language, curious tonality. Curious language on its own can still be self-defeating, but curious tonality built in with curious language. What do you think? What could we do here?
And it's so funny because even watching you now, curious body language too,
totally
right?
It is.
Am I open?
There's an openness to it.
Yeah, what do am I like, no, I like blue, right? Or, you know what? Let's talk about, do you like red or blue? Tell me why, right? It's honestly a much more fun way to live too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'll live longer. I think I'll have less stress. And I think it was probably the hardest thing for me in coaching school, Cameron, and I know because you do a lot of coaching too, is when you're a consultant or advisor, you're paid to be a solution provider. You're paid to have the answers. When you're a coach, you're actually not supposed to provide the answers. You're supposed to ask good questions and, again, create a coaching environment where people get to a solution on their own. And at the beginning of coaching, was terrible. And the people would, we'd do practice coaching and my teachers would be like, Jim, you're solving. Jim, you're offering solutions. Jim, you're trying to be a caretaker, right? And I had to really, really work on that. And one of my favorite lessons in coaching was the difference between coaching, counseling, and advising. Like where we spent an entire 4-hour training on just the differences between those. It was fascinating for me. And I can still hear our 2 professors in the back of my head because I was horrible at it. Because my entire life I'd been either an executive or a problem solver. And so I I thought if somebody came into me and said, oh, like a client came in and said, even if it was a practice client, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, should I go for this new job? Should I not go for this new job? I would be like in my early coaching class, I'd be like, take the new job. And here's why. Right. Which is again, like I'd get 0 points on my practice because I was advising, I wasn't coaching.
Well, the great thing about a good, beautiful, curious question, like the example of, okay, what do you think we should do? When they come to you with that challenge that you mentioned about, what do you think we should do? Then you're able to witness their thinking, their ability in this case to think strategically, to see, okay, this is the outcome that we're wanting to achieve. Yeah, this is where we are right now. Here's the challenge that we're facing, and okay, well, here's how I see we should overcome that. Because then you're usually going to be able to ask a follow-up question along the lines of, well, I'd love to understand a little more. How do you see that enabling us to solve this challenge? How do you see that actually playing out? And
how did you get there?
How did you get there? And again, you're going into it with curiosity versus, and you could, especially if you've got some incredible wisdom in a specific area and you know the answer, or you've got a good feeling for the answer. One of two things is going to happen in this environment. If you go straight for the answer and provide it straight away, and there's a time and a place where you will just need to do that and just execute, and when that's required. But it's also going to mean that person doesn't get the opportunity to grow through the situation. 100%. The other couple of things that can happen here is, one, they articulate. If you can see, okay, it doesn't seem like they're going to get the outcome that we're shooting for with this. One of two things is usually going to happen. One, they're going to start to share and then realize, oh, yeah, this isn't. And then that's where you can start to have a real conversation and deep dive down into the very specific area that is the gap in their current thinking, because you've given them the space to explore their thinking and how they came to the answer, which enables you to pinpoint rather than having to micromanage the entire process. You're able just to pinpoint, write down, get down, solve it, and then get back up again. The other one is that they come up with something that you haven't thought of yet.
At all. Correct.
And all of a sudden, the beautiful wisdom of the group environment is unable to thrive.
And you're like, oh, that's why I hired you. Like, you have some really interesting insights. And and when that happens and you literally see growth in front of you, like a blossoming flower or something, it's an incredible feeling. Yeah. And that's probably been these last 5 years, again, when we're talking in chapters. So I'd say 55 to 60 in my chronological age, tremendous growth for me personally and professionally, how I'm working, what I'm working, but also these kind of learnings. And it was, again, going back to school too. I had to go back to school. I had to go back to a structured learning environment with a professor, with assignments, with homework. I hadn't had that since I was 21, 22 years old, right? And I went back to school at 57.
So what was the transition? Because, okay, you went back to school. How did you go from leading some of these massive companies and serious roles within those companies to then switching over onto the coaching side? There's a space in between. Take us through it. What happened?
Well, probably many of the guests, because I've listened to your other podcast. I mean, again, uncontrollable circumstances. So just backing up calendar-wise, I was a president at 20th Century Fox. 20th Century Fox got sold to Disney, and that transaction closed in fall of 2019. And fall of 2019, I decided for the first time in my entire career that I was going to take a 6-month sabbatical. Like I was literally going to take a break. When you talk about blaze and graze, I was going to graze. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, the way the world works, I was also in the middle of a divorce, not any divorce is planned, but I was in the middle of a divorce. Not a horrible divorce, but no divorce is great, right? Okay. And so I had this personal thing going on and this professional thing at the same time, and I needed space. And so I announced to the world, like LinkedIn posts, the whole bit, I'll be back in April of 2020. April of 2020, there was no back to come back to. Like, the world had shut down, especially in California. We did COVID. Like, we were on house lockdown. We weren't shopping. Yeah. In fall of 2019, I think old Jim would have left Fox and already had like 6 interviews lined up at other big studios or other big companies, because that's what Jim was, right? He was an executive in a big media company. And all of a sudden, the world and fate said, nope, like, you're not in control of this, Jim. And I was isolated. I was, separate. I was living alone because we were, going through a divorce. It was me and 2 dogs. And it gave me a ton of time with myself, probably the most amount of time I'd ever had alone, and the most amount of time, it was uncomfortable at times, Cameron, because like I had to look in the mirror and really talk to myself and own what had worked in my marriage and not worked in my marriage, and really, gave me the opportunity to think about what I wanted to do next. And the pivot moment was I had been a journaler my entire life. And one of my projects, because I was trying to come up with projects to do during COVID, was I had my journals spread out all over the place in the house. Like, they were in drawers and they were in cupboards. And I went and got one of those big plastic tubs, with the lid. And I was like, I'm going to put all my journals from my entire life in one place, because at some point somebody may want to read these journals. I was thinking of my nieces. And as I was doing that, I started thumbing through them, and I had started journaling, when I was like 13 or 14. And honestly, Cameron, some of it I didn't recognize. Like, I knew it was my handwriting, but I didn't remember the stories. Like, it was things I had forgot or I had blocked or whatever. And out of that came the realization that I did not want to go back to a big media job.
How was the realization? How did that come up?
I found, and again, Cameron, I think you and I met in this time as I think back, but I found the Japanese, I love Japan, by the way, and I'm very influenced by Japanese culture, art, design, philosophy, and I found the term Ikigai, which is this incredible term, the intersection of what you're good at, what you're passionate about doing, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And the Japanese, all you Ikigai masters out there, I'm way simplifying this, but basically life and harmony is the intersection of those 4 arcs. And I thought, you know what? I'm really, really good at big consumer products jobs, but I don't love it anymore. I don't have the passion anymore. I feel robotic. I feel formulaic. I feel like I'm just playing a part again. And I really wanted to work differently, and I wanted to work. I wasn't sure what it was. I wasn't sure but I just thought I need to take some time. And so that's when I made the decision. For me, geography, and I know you've lived all over the place too, that's when I made the decision to leave California. There was part of me, if I had stayed in California, I would have probably led back to one of the big media studios. I needed to get out of California because of my personal situation, but I also needed to get out of California to not tempt me to go back to one of the big studios. And
you've just done an access thing there as well.
Yeah.
You realize you've done that? That's a massive example of that.
I moved back to the Midwest. I moved back to my roots. And I spent that first summer of COVID staring at Lake Michigan, like where I had grown up, and just being, with myself. And then I had 2 or 3 friends that we kind of formed a COVID pod. They've been friends of mine for over 40 years. They would come up and stay at me with my house in Lake Michigan, and we'd wear our masks and all that kind of stuff. But we would just sit and talk. And out of that came the book, and out of that came coaching, and out of that came advising, and out of that came speaking and everything else. But it was 2020. I mean, it was really the coming together of the personal upheaval and the professional upheaval at the same time, which could have crippled me, could have just put me down. I was the lowest I'd ever been, Cameron. People that knew me were worried about me. They were worried about, was I going to snap back? Because they'd never seen me like that. I'd never seen myself like that. And to be honest, I was drinking too much, and I was not eating healthy, and I was not exercising, and I was wallowing and doing a lot of bad behavior. And I had to wake up. I had to snap out of it. But I'm such a firm believer in fate that everything happens for a reason. I had to go through that. And it wasn't that I had an addiction problem or anything like that, but I had to bottom. I had to hit rock bottom and look at myself in the mirror and say, Jim, this is ridiculous. You've got to pick yourself up. Like, your life is not over. You're 55. You're not 75. You're 55. And I'm here because of some amazing friends and some amazing strength that I found in myself to pick up and change. I had to geographically and physically change in order to mentally change, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. That geographical change, which was an environmental change, it was an environment change, right? And that, physical environment matters. It really does, especially when there's an anchoring to certain parts of your life in a certain place. Getting
certain
out of
identities.
Can be a really good thing. And often I've just found this for my own self with many clients now as well, and many friends and people that I've had the pleasure of knowing. Often our biggest breakthroughs come directly after the biggest breakdowns, because there was something that had to be learned there. And, I think about it in this way as well, of sometimes the darkest moments need to occur. I share it in this way on stage sometimes. I go, do you ever notice how your biggest breakthroughs come directly after your biggest breakdowns? And everyone goes, oh, yeah, of course. And I just say, well, it's because you weren't listening.
Yeah.
There were signs along the way, and it was a little shake of Jim, for example, and then a little bit more of a shake, and a little bit more of a shake, until a point where it's like a massive proverbial slap across the face. You're going, hey, man, all right, here you go. And there's something that needed to shift. And it often does happen, I find, within these phases. And sometimes we need to go down to rock bottom. Sometimes it's a bit of a dip down. But often it's this shifting of the guard, if you will, the shifting of who it is that we're becoming next. And from what you've shared, that phase of your life going through the global leadership roles, that was Jim. That was aligned at that phase in your life. Mm-hmm. And it came a point where this phase sounds, from what you've shared so far, is a really beautiful aligned phase for you now.
Yeah, I think I have said in, interviews and in writings I've done that I think Jim today, or Jim the last couple of years, is the most authentic version of Jim.
That's a good thing. Mm-hmm. To be continuing to become more authentic as life goes on.
It's a lovely feeling. I mean, you'll understand this, Cameron, as I realized that so much of my identity was wrapped up in the companies I worked for. I was Disney Jim. I was DreamWorks Jim. I was Fox Jim. I was Gap Jim. And you know what? I just needed to be Jim again. And I needed to be all of Jim, all the complex, lovely parts, ugly parts, hurt parts, trauma parts, all of that, like the mosaic that was Jim, I had to fall in love with again and accept myself unconditionally, and then agree that I could still grow and I could still learn and I could still change. And it's been a remarkable voyage. I mean, I literally, if I taught you at 55, I would have been like, I'm not dating again. Love sucks. Like, I'm so hurt, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I'm talking to you now. I'm going to be 61 in 2 months. I got married 4 months ago, right? So
congratulations.
I met somebody new after, but I could have never been with the person I'm with right now in that old body. And I say to him, or in that old soul, or in that old psyche. And I say to him, at some point, you're going to meet my exes and thank them, because they had the worst parts of me. And by the way, I still have bad days, and I still have bad behavior, and I still make mistakes every day. It's just a totally different energy than it was 5 years ago.
Those lessons that we learn along the way. I'm exactly the same with Brittany. We got married a bit over a year ago, and I was single for 10 years. And the lessons first learned in the previous long-term relationships prior to that time, but right up to the last woman that I dated before I met Brittany is, there was a massive lesson that I needed to learn that, would have shown up in our relationship. And as a result of me truly learning that and going through and breaking through something that was huge for me, it hasn't entered the relationship, I think, at all. Whereas that was something that was pretty persistent and pretty consistent across previous women that I dated.
The thing that I know, Cameron, and I'm sure it's the same thing in your life, is those people that have known you the longest. So for me, my sister and my college friends, and I have high school friends too. I have friends that I've been friends with since I was like 12, 13 years old. When I'm with them now, they say to me, this is the happiest we've ever seen you in your entire life. Like, they like this version of Jim. They're like, they liked the old versions too. It wasn't that I was unpleasant, but they literally are like, oh my God, this is such a different environment. And you're so much, I think I'm more fun to be around. I think I'm more spontaneous. I live with more gratitude. You mentioned gratitude before. I live with more gratitude. I relish the small moments and the being present and all that. And I think it is only possible because of the break, to your point.
Have you fallen in love with yourself again?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a pretty unique little snowflake, you know? I mean, I write my review every year. I told you it's coming up for my birthday, and I know what I'm bad about, and I still have control freak tendencies, and I still worry about a lot of things that I can't fix. But yeah, I love myself. I accept myself even more than loving myself. I accept myself unconditionally. And, you know, one of the things I talk about this in the book, one of the things I did during COVID too is I went back and watched the RuPaul Drag Race series from season 1 all the way through to the current day. And they end every episode saying, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anyone else? And that little phrase really, every time she says it, I'm like, and I wake up now wondering, I wake up with like an eagerness of like, like, and I have a plan. I have things on my calendar. I had this on my calendar today. I knew I was spending time with you. But I also have a lot of open space in my calendar. And I'm like, well, I wonder what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm going to write today, or maybe I started needle pointing, you know, like I started doing like these different like handicraft things and stuff. And it's like, maybe I'm going to read, maybe I'm going to take a nap. I don't know. I love it. I love the spontaneity of it. And I plan vacations, but that's about it.
Yeah. I think that's important to do.
Well, because
having them
my husband has a
proactively.
real job. My husband has, quote, a real job. Like, so we have to plan when we go on vacation.
So what would you recommend for those thinking, you know what, I do want to maybe create a bit more space in my life, but they're busy. They're in like you said, from a career that is maybe more in that earlier phase of your life. How would you go about, and I guess this is probably the grazing part, you know, talking about what we spoke about earlier, how would you go about doing that if you were back there now?
The easiest thing I can say to your viewers and listeners is to we all have a calendar. Everybody has a calendar. Most everybody has a digital calendar now. Like, there's very few people, I think, that are still doing handwritten calendars. The way that I started this was I had to start putting break time in my day. And so it would literally say gym time, JIM time.
Yeah.
It should have said GYM time, but it was JIM time. And JIM time meant to myself, and if you have anyone else, like many people who have assistants schedule their time, right? Or even if you use like an AI scheduler, by putting in just I started out with a half an hour a day where it would just say gym time. And that didn't mean lunch. That didn't mean catch up on emails. It was literally just a forced break in the day. That's how I started. I had to physically build in those breaks and be comfortable with that was actually productive time. And that may mean I read a book. It may mean I doodled. It may mean sometimes I cleaned my desk, rearranged my desk or something, but like it was my time. It meant no meetings, no phone calls, no outside interference. And I would close my door. When I was in an office, I would physically close my door. And I was always known for having a quote open door policy, but that was a half an hour where I would close my door. Sometimes I had a sofa in my last office. Sometimes I'd lay down on the sofa and close my eyes. Not necessarily take a nap, but sometimes I'd listen to music. Sometimes I might listen to like a guided meditation. It was different, but that would be my advice, is to start to put a block of time. And if you can only do 15 minutes, do 15 minutes. If you can only do 10 minutes, do 10 minutes, but something where you're controlling the time. Otherwise, like every other leader of human beings or executives, and it doesn't matter what level you are, you're going to be going meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, or email to email to email to email. And you're going to get to the end of the day and be like, where did that day go?
I think one of the things that a lot of people do, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, of thinking, I don't have the time. I don't have the time for that. My nephew was about probably 3. I was back in Australia at the time, and I was staying at mum and dad's house, and nephew calls up on the phone from up the road where my brother and sister-in-law live, and mum calls out and says, "Uncle Cam, it's for you." And I go, "Hello." And he goes, "Oh, Uncle Cam, can you come play with me?" And it was about 10:20 or so in the morning. And what I would normally do at that point in time, I would work throughout the day so I could get everything done, and then head up there late afternoon, around 5 o'clock, about 5 o'clock, I think it was. And then we'd have a blast together. And I said to him, "Yeah, I'll be up there later on this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to it." And his response was, "Oh, okay." And it was like I had just done something evil.
Disappointed,
right?
yeah.
And I hung up the phone feeling really bad about it, that I had stuff to do. And I went back to my computer. I sat down and I go, well, I've got because I've got meetings coming up there. And in about 15 minutes, I got meetings. And I just stopped myself for a moment. And I said, to myself, I don't have the time to do this. And look, I've got a meeting in 15 minutes. Okay. Can I get done? I was going to focus on the emails that I was going to get done. Can I get them done a little later in the day? The answer is, of course, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I jumped in the car, drove up the road, ran inside, and said, "Well, we got 5 minutes, man. What do you want to do?" And we went out, we bounced on the trampoline. I go, "Well, we got 1 minute. Like, we got 20 seconds. What do you want to do?" Until there's no time left. And I said, "Okay, I got to head back down. I got a call. I love you. I'll see you later on this afternoon. All right." High five. And then I was back down. And it was a huge moment for me of thinking about these as micro moments, right? That we might not feel like we've got much time, and it's valid in so many cases. It's not to say, "Oh, of course you've got time." No, there is a crazy schedule that most of us have. And there are these moments where even if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, as you mentioned before, 15 minutes, just to put that, to just get it started.
Yes.
And just notice what happens in that time. Notice how maybe recharged you feel, or notice what ideas start to form. Because time and time again, when I'm giving a keynote and I'll ask the question, where do your best ideas come from? Barely ever is it, I don't think anyone has ever said, it's while I'm at my computer working on an Excel spreadsheet, right? It's just not happening, man. You're out in nature, or walking, or on the toilet, or in the shower, or laying down, and just giving yourself the space to dream and think and not have to be somewhere at that time. And so this is honoring yourself.
I love this.
It is honoring yourself, and it is treating that time as sacred. And I think about this in a way of treating yourself like your very best client, right? It's not that you're more important or less important, but on par, 100% you are, right? You're not less important than that. And if you think about it, if you get that into your calendar, if you think about it from a business standpoint, are you ever going to, unless it is an absolute emergency, are you going to cancel that meeting with your best client? The answer is no.
No.
So why would you cancel on yourself? Because if you're canceling on yourself, you're not valuing yourself on at least at the same level as you're valuing other people.
For
And
sure.
we need to put ourselves first in this case, because that increases our capacity, our ability to be able to then sustain performance and show up in the best possible way for others. And so there's such wisdom in what you shared of just getting that little bit of time in your calendar and then committing to that and following through with that. And I'd say one extra layer to that as well. If you can take the moment, maybe just at the end, or it's at the end of the day, or it's at the end of the week, however you want to do this, to just notice how did you feel at the end of that? You know, what ideas formed? What did you notice? Because what you're aiming to do is you're aiming to build the benefits as to why you're taking that time. And each time that I've worked with a client where we schedule out the times where they're getting away, whether it's with family or to simply go and plan, that time, I think of it as I'm on video right now with my hands. Imagine it being in a slightly different direction. If you're listening to this, a slightly different direction, like a 1, 2, 5 degree shift.
Mm-hmm.
That's what can happen in this time.
Yeah, it's not a big shift. It's not.
And over the course of a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, something that you do there, and all of a sudden you come up with an idea, you go, what about this? Just like you did in Lake Michigan, like when you were out there, the ideas started to form and through the conversations that you had, and all of a sudden something came and go, what if I did this?
Mm-hmm.
What about that? And all of a sudden something can come out of this that can completely change the trajectory of your life in the end. And in the moment, it doesn't seem like it because it seems so insignificant. But that's one of the ways that I've personally valued that time that you're talking about, because I find it difficult at different times as well when there is just such an intense schedule that I have on, continuing to come back to that and just treating it as sacred, because it is very, very valuable use of time, I think is a really good approach to take.
It is. It really is. And what you're talking about too is that cumulative effect. If you do it over time, you can start to look back in the kind of the rearview mirror and in hindsight and say, oh, that is when I had that insight, or I thought about this situation in a different way. No, I totally agree. And I still, like Sunday night, which is kind of left over from my corporate days, I'll look at my calendar for the week on Sunday night, even now, and say, do I have enough break time built into it, right? Have I overscheduled? Like I had to learn, even as a coach, I coach Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays only. I don't coach on Mondays and Fridays because I could coach every day of the week, but I realized, again, from an energy management standpoint, that I wasn't getting enough spontaneous time or me time in. So for my coaching clients that use my scheduling tool, they can only book on Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Thursdays unless there's some big emergency or, they're traveling or whatever. Of course, we'll have that conversation. But I had to learn that as well. Because originally I just put out my calendar and I was like, schedule coaching whenever you want.
Pretty soon you realize, right?
I'm like, nope, can't do it. Yep.
What's great about what you just shared there is this, you've got feedback loops going on. And on the Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, you've got a small feedback loop happening there of, am I getting enough of what I'm actually wanting to experience? In this case, it's break time. For those listening, you can do this in every area. Think of it as the progress pulse, call it the progress pulse, which are these 4 questions of what's working, what's not, what am I going to do about it next? And then what support or what help do I need? And then Brittany and I do that on a weekly basis within our marriage. We just soften the questions so it doesn't feel like a performance review every time. Just a little disclaimer there if you do it in your relationship, because you soften the questions and it enables you to get on the same page and make tweaks along the way rather than transformations. A transformation is a monumental shift in direction.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for a transformation. It's usually when you're entering into a new phase of your life. But if we can go through these tweaks where we get 1% better, 2% better, 5% better on, say, a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then it can minimize the amount of transformations that we've got to go through, because we didn't get so far off track because we were constantly making these adjustments as we went along. And that's what you're doing really, really well by the sounds of it from what you've shared with Sundays. And whether it's Sunday, whether it's Saturday, whatever day of the week.
Wherever works for you, right?
Highly, highly recommend that you do this with your teams, that you do this individually. For me personally, I have this within the performance tracker that I utilize, and it's within a sheet. It has as those four questions. Okay, for this week, what worked, what didn't, what am I doing differently this next week, and what support, what help do I need? Because it enables me to make those minor adjustments, and I don't get it perfect every time. I'm only human, right? But just continuing to have that front and center. And I think back to what you shared earlier, we were talking about intentionality. Right?
Yeah.
This is enabling us to be intentional. It's enabling us to be proactive. It's enabling us to be strategic with our time to ensure that you're making the most of it and that you're continuing to line up with an even greater version of yourself, which I love.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Hey, this has been an amazing conversation so
Yeah,
far.
I loved it.
We have a rapid fire segment on the show
I'm
called
ready.
Your Edge. 3 things: values, beliefs, and habits, rituals. So first question, first and foremost, what's your number one value and why?
My number one value is, I call it the value of kindness. And it's really the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. Like, that's been from a childhood. My parents lived by the golden rule. And I think that's how I try to move through life.
I love that. How has that shown up, just quickly? How has that shown up over the years?
I mean, I think I love when I run into people maybe that I worked with 20 years ago, and I'll run into them like in an airport or a mall or somewhere random. And they'll come up to me and say, you know, when I worked with you, that was one of my favorite jobs I ever had. Like, that to me
Wow.
just like warms my heart. And in many cases, people will always say to me, you always remembered my name, or you always remembered something about me. And to me, that's because that's how I wanted to work. That's how I wanted to be managed. And I've even had people tell me, Cameron, like, listen, I worked at Disney and DreamWorks and Fox. We did layoffs. And I had a situation in an airport, where we had to reduce teams. And I had a situation in an airport where a gentleman made a beeline towards me. This is about 2 years ago. And I thought, what is this? I did not recognize him at all. And he said, Jim? And I said, yes. And he said, you don't remember me? And I said, you look familiar, but can you help me? And he said, I worked for you 15 years ago and you eliminated my position. And I thought, whoop, here we go, right? Like, in the middle of the airport, right? And he said, I want to tell you that even though that was a hard conversation, you treated me with dignity and fairness and respect. And I just wanted to say thank you. And turned and walked away, right? And I got like so emotional because I was like, that meant so much to me, because I remember when we were preparing to do those reductions, I would always meet with my team and meet with HR and be like, I want this to go as kindly and fairly as it can go. I do not want these to be abrupt. Like, we are impacting people's lives, and we can never forget that. Like, we cannot be cavalier about this. Yes, we have to do it. Yes, we need to reduce our team by 15%, but these are human beings we're dealing with. And the fact that he did that, because it could have gone either way. He could have been like, you were a huge asshole and you were the meanest boss I ever had. And the fact that he said that to me, it really meant everything to me, because that's how I try to move through life.
It really is a demonstration of your character when somebody shows up that many years later and has that to say
and
from a challenging situation.
That's I recognized him, but I didn't remember. I couldn't have said his name. I recognized him.
Those of you listening, just do that.
Don't
take anything else away. Just do that.
Just do that.
Please.
Just do better.
Yeah,
just
better. in all situations, in every situation, wherever possible, like, people are you no idea what people are going through. Everyone has their stuff. There's a question that I ask in the Edge of Possible keynote when I talk about the challenges that we're going through, the problems that people are facing. And I say, anyone, just out of curiosity, anyone problem free here at the moment? And, it gets a chuckle. So of course not. We're all going through stuff. And the more that you can act with kindness, you don't know. You have no idea what somebody else is going through, the challenges that they're experiencing. And if we can approach the world with a little bit more kindness and a little bit more empathy, we're going to be much better off as a civilization. So I love that. What's a belief that has shaped who you become, whether that's a belief about yourself, others, or the world around you?
My belief, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, it was interesting, Kim. My belief is that small intentional changes can accumulate and make big impact over time. And so another one of my kind of mantras or messages is, may we leave our corner of the world better than we found it. And I approach jobs or personal relationships or charity work or nonprofit work I do is that whatever situation I enter, I want to make sure that I add value, that I make it a little bit better than when I got there, not sweeping changes. It doesn't have to be these grand, sweeping gestures, but just these small incremental changes. And that over time, the ripple effect of those small changes can actually accumulate and make a big difference in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the incremental changes is we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in a short amount of time and underestimate what we can achieve over a longer period of time. And when we're really intentional about those small incremental changes, anyone can become 1% better today.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you mentioned, I love when you said 1% before, because I literally, when I was in corporate, I did this too. Like I would look at myself in the mirror in the morning and be like, today is going to be a better day than yesterday because we learned, right? Like I would just literally say to myself, and even when I made mistakes, and I made so many mistakes in my career, and I would always say, and I even tell my coaching clients, we're going to fail forward. Like, what did I learn from that mistake? And let's try not to make it again, right? I think so much of it is just like those positive mantras of, we're going to be better today. We're going to be better today than we were yesterday. Because you know what? We're one day wiser. We're one day older, one day more experienced. And I've said that to myself for a long time. It used to be when I was shaving. I don't shave as much as I used to. I have a beard now for your people that aren't viewing.
And a very good one of that.
It used to be when I was sitting there shaving, I'd just be kind of saying that to myself.
Yeah. It's often when we make progress and we get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and we're getting momentum and it's growth happening and it's so exciting, it's so amazing. But then a setback happens. And I've seen this happen time and time again. Maybe the most dangerous point is when we make the progress, but then get a massive setback. Because what can happen in our self-talk can be, see, you're just kidding yourself. Told you so. It was never going to work out. Insert your negative self-talk here that comes in to try to drag it down. And it's those moments that if we can have the positive self-talk, the empowered self-talk, that even though it was a few steps backward today, this is still failing forward in what you shared there. It's still moving forward because, it might not have gone how I thought it was going to, but now I have this newfound wisdom that I can utilize and I can apply going forward. And this is where it's about really important of being certain in your outcome, but flexible in your approach, right? Be certain in your outcome, because if you need to control the approach as well as the outcome, you are setting yourself up for disappointment, because we do not live in a science lab, right? There are variables that occur. Many of those are outside of our control. And so knowing that there has to be flexibility, no matter what situation it is or what area of life or business or love or whatever the area is, our ability to be able to continue moving and evolving and being flexible in our approach means that we can have a setback and still be stepping forward in their way. So,
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Love that. What's a habit, ritual, or routine that you simply can't live without? And this could be a daily habit that you have in place, whether it's morning or evening, right out to an annual tradition that you have.
It is my daily evening habit, and that is I try for 20 minutes of pleasure reading before I go to sleep. Now, I'm going to own that sometimes it's about 15 minutes and I might fall asleep. And when I mean pleasure reading, I love reading, but I have a stack of books next to my bed that are not business books. So novels, fiction, historical fiction, like to me, it's like escapist reading. I would say that's a relatively new one, because I had gotten away from pleasure reading. I had become more of a news scroller, and this is part of like leaving the device in the other room too. And I love books, and I love physical books. I love books. I love the smell of books. I love the feel of books, and I have the ability to read multiple books at the same time. I used to read a book cover to cover and then move on to the next one. I now can have 2 or 3 books going at the same time. Like I love historical fiction. I love spy novels. I love thrillers. But I try for 20 minutes. Sometimes I go longer. Sometimes I fall asleep. Sometimes I'll wake up an hour later and the book will, my reading my reading glasses will be like this and the book will be on my chest.
Yeah.
But that's a habit that I really like.
That's really good. Brittany, my wife, has a similar one where I'm usually like we'll go to bed at the same time, and we're in bed fairly early. To most people, it'd be very early. For me, because I get up much earlier. I'm usually up like somewhere between 4 and 5 a.m.
Right.
And I'll go to sleep first, and she'll stay reading for a certain period of time. It might be 20 minutes, might be half hour, 45 minutes. And she loves it. Similar, like can be multiple books going on. And I love that she's able to have that time for herself because she needs it to wind down. And so I love that you've got that as a ritual, a little habit there that helps you where it's not needing to learn something or grow through something. It's purely for what you said, the pleasure of it. And so I think people could learn from there, whether it's reading or some other thing that you really enjoy. I love sitting down at the piano and just playing.
Yeah, I was going to say like people who can play an instrument or, people who like do handicraft. Like I know people who crochet or knit or things like that. Like I think it's just something that kind of takes you like out of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Jim, thank you for coming on the show. This has been so good. Where can people find out more about the book that you wrote recently, what's coming up book-wise, and other things?
It's so easy. I mean, LinkedIn, I'm Jim Fielding on LinkedIn. Jimfielding.com is the website that has all my latest and greatest news. The podcast is called Ask for an Answer with Jim Fielding. But, really the website and LinkedIn, you can find everything you need to know.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, hey, good to see you, man. It's been
good to see you. Thanks for
pleasure.
everything. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. And for those of you listening, we'll make sure that everything that Jim mentioned and that we spoke about here today will be linked in the show notes at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. We've got some great new guests coming up. So make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment. And until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.